The Atreyu Daily Trainer 2, a shoe that marks a bit of a rebirth for their brand and a doubling down on their mission of honoring simplicity with classic understated Atreyu design accents and now very modern materials. They come together in a shoe that is something quite special. I go a long ways back with Atreyu, back into late 2019, and this is before the brand even launched. This is when Michael Krychek, the founder of Atreyu, first started appearing in my Instagram feeds, promoting this new shoe that he was calling the base model, which was a very simple, neutral, flexible trainer. A shoe that looked back on very simple trainers from 5-6 years prior to that. Think something like a Saucony Kinvara, the original Kinvaras, when they still were flexible and simple and neutral, and they just felt and worked really well. That was what Michael was trying to channel again in this new shoe. Now, the end of 2019, early 2020 was an interesting era for running shoes, especially if you remember it. This was the peak hysteria around Cheaterfly, the conversation of technology and foams in super shoes and shoes getting max stack, all of that sort of stuff. This was the loudest voices coming out against that were really, frantic at this time. This was right as the World Athletics was putting their regulation for the 40 mil stack height that we all talk about now as super shoes, and just a huge conversation in technology in running shoes at that time. So here's Atreyu launching in early 2020 with this base model, this very, very simple shoe. Again, something that looked back on trainers from half a decade prior to that even. And it was a really, really fascinating shoe that I think was one of the most important shoes that came out in some time. And that shoe was this, the Atreyu base model. This is the original one. This is the one from 2020. I spent a ton of time in this shoe. In fact, I remember going back and refreshing Atreyu running when they first launched the initial batch of pre-orders for their subscription service, which was how they originally launched this shoe, thinking that this was going to sell out. And I wanted to be one of the first to get this shoe because this was everything I loved in a shoe. This was a simple, neutral, flexible shoe that didn't have a rubber outsole, so it gave you that very compliant feel to the ground, which was wonderful, in a simple EVA foam, which, I still love EVA foams to this day, but, 6 years ago, I still love them as well. And it just was a shoe that was a breath of fresh air. There really wasn't much else like this at the time, and the industry was just starting the push to what we have now, all this technology in shoes. And I remember getting my first pair of the base models and absolutely loving the feel of them. But there was one problem with all that exposed foam. You're running on exposed EVA. They were not durable. They felt amazing, but they just did not hold up. They lasted maybe 100 miles, if that, and they were pretty much worn out. But that was how the subscription service launched originally for the brand. You get a new pair every month. You'd send your old pair back. They'd be recycled. And it worked really well. But still, the essence of the shoe was wonderful. And over the past 5 years, Atreyu has produced a bunch of shoes, but namely, the base model continued to evolve into the base model 3. There was a shoe called the Daily Trainer, which was essentially the base model with a rubber outsole, a couple other minor changes to it. They had some carbon-plated shoes, the Artist and the Race model. They had a trail shoe. They made a full line of shoes. But again, Michael was always searching for that refinement and that simplicity in his shoe. And that's where this shoe, the Daily Trainer 2, really comes in, because this shoe now feels like the ultimate execution of what Michael's always been trying to do in a single shoe. From a spec standpoint, we have 30 mil foam in the heel, 24 mil foam in the forefoot, giving you a 6 mil drop. And that 6 mil drop is a quintessential Atreyu trainer feel. Michael feels really strongly about that level of drop being enough for people that need some offset, but still neutral enough and flat enough where you're getting the most out of the outsole of the shoe. Now I'm going to say the 6 mil drop in this shoe feels more like 4 to 6, just because this foam is compressive, and I'll get to that in a bit. and you do feel very flat in the shoe, and it feels wonderful, but if you do need some drop, it is still there. This shoe weighs 7.7 ounces or 218 grams according to the brand, though you see from the pair that I received, it's actually 210 grams, 211, so it's a little bit lighter than that. That's putting this, a trainer, only about 10 grams away from the top-end super shoes like the Nike Alpha Fly 3, the Adidas Adios Pro 4, the Saucony Endorphin Elite 2. This is a trainer that's only 10 grams away from the top-tier super shoes. That's pretty remarkable. And from a ride profile standpoint, I would call this shoe lively. And a lot of that liveliness is coming from the foam, but also just the overall lightweightness of this shoe. It's really quite fantastic. Starting with the upper on this shoe, one thing Atreyu has always done very, very well are their uppers. They've always been very simple, very well fitting, good lockdown, structure where you need it, but nothing that's overdone. There's been a few iterations of it, and this new iteration on the Daily Trainer 2 is fantastic. This is a new engineered mesh textile that the brand calls Astronit, which is simple. It's somewhere between the material that's on the Adidas Evo SL and what's actually on the Nike Vaporfly 4. It's breathable like that. It sits around the foot. It's very compliant to the foot, but it's also very soft. It's also a very simple one-piece upper with very minimal overlays, a bit of a toe bumper, a bit of reinforcement along the eyelet chain, a little bit of structure here in the heel, though the Achilles flare on this shoe is actually not really stout, which is actually another trademark of Atreyu shoes. There's enough padding back here and there's enough pocket back here to hold your heel down. The tongue is refined from previous Atreyus, and the eyelet chain is just simple, just works. You have some wide flat laces that distribute the load across the top of the foot. This tongue, which is gusseted in this shoe, sits on the top of the foot, and overall it just provides an excellent lockdown with a upper that basically disappears on the foot. Very breathable, sheds moisture very, very well, and it just works. And that is all an upper really needs to do, and this upper is fantastic. On sizing and fit of this shoe, I went true to size, US men's size 9, which is what I wear in basically every running shoe, and I have a nearly perfect training fit in this shoe, meaning I have about a full index finger's width between the front of my big toe and the front of the shoe, which is a little bit more than I want in a race shoe. But again, in a trainer, I want a little bit more generous fit because I'm doing a lot more in the shoe. I'm spending a lot more time in the shoe. From a width standpoint, I would say this shoe's kind of in the middle. It's not narrow, but it's also not a wide shoe. But this upper textile is very compliant to the foot. So if you do have a wide foot, you can probably make it work in here because this upper is going to wrap around your foot. And there's enough width in the midsole through the length of the shoe that your foot's not going to spill over in this shoe. So definitely my recommendation is to go true to size in this shoe for a very ideal training fit. Moving to the midsole of this shoe, this is probably the biggest, most noticeable change in this shoe, especially if you've ever run in a previous Atreyu model. This is a new foam that Atreyu calls their Cush foam. And what this foam is a 40% Pebax, 60% TPEE blend. Pebax, not generic Peba. This is our chemistry. This is the top of the line premier Pebax foam that you find in a lot of other brands. And it works fantastically in this shoe. This midsole foam is one of the most dynamic, resilient foams that I've run in some time. And the fact that this shoe is so simple and you're essentially running directly on this wonderful foam is absolutely fantastic because you really feel how dynamic and resilient this foam is. It's softer than you would expect, but it's also more supportive than you would expect. It's just a really amazing package of materials in this midsole in a foam that I think Michael's already said that when he launched Atreyu, he wished he could use a foam like this. Now this is a foam that's definitely available for him, and he's put it to excellent use. The actual stack of this midsole is 15.5 in the forefoot, 21.5 in the heel. But there is a 5mm eTPU insole in this shoe, which is a classic Atreyu thing. They've always done that. So you're getting a little bit more substantial, a little bit more structure of eTPU directly underfoot, sitting on top of this very resilient, very lively 40% Pebax, 60% TPE blend with this amazing CPU outsole. It just gives you a feel for all of those foams. It's bouncy, it's cushion, but you're feeling the ground. You get a lot of proprioceptive feedback. It's just the ideal combination of things that I look for in a shoe, and it really all comes together in this shoe. And moving to the outsole of this shoe, I think this is probably the biggest upgrade in a shoe that has a ton of upgrades. This is the brand's new Gripcast outsole. And what it is a CPU outsole, a very simple 2 mil thick CPU outsole. And it is absolutely fantastic because CPU outsoles give you unmatched durability. In fact, I have over 50 miles on this shoe and I don't see any wear at all in this shoe. Even the micro diamond pattern that's on this outsole is still there. It's not even worn off, even in my high traction areas. CPU outsoles are absolutely outstanding for durability. The grip in this is outstanding. CPU outsoles have really good grip, wet, dry, hot, cold. I've run this shoe and everything. I've run this shoe in really horrible conditions. This outsole performs, and it reduces a lot of weight. As I said, this is a 210 gram shoe, so it's very close to top tier super shoes. But what's most remarkable about a CPU outsole is the way it feels, the way it flexes. This shoe now gives you that ground feel from the base model, but in a shoe that's durable, that's going to last you hundreds of miles, something the base model never could do. It's a really huge upgrade, and I don't think Michael has really said enough about how big of an upgrade this outsole is on this shoe to really protect this amazing midsole foam and really just make a shoe that's going to last quite a long time as a trainer, which is great. With all that out of the way, let's talk about the ride of this shoe. And one of the first things that stands out about this shoe is the geometry. One of the reasons I've always come back and loved Atreyu since day one is this very simple, very classic geometry. It's almost no toe rocker in the shoe. It's a very flat, very neutral geometry, and I really value that in a shoe, especially nowadays when every shoe has a ton of forefoot rocker in it and they force you to run a certain way. This is a very simple shoe that allows you to control how you're going to run in this shoe. Combine that with a lot of width in this platform, wide forefoot, wide heel, wide midfoot, which is actually quite unique in this shoe. A lot of shoes now, especially in this very simple, very neutral, very flexible trainer, will have a very narrow midfoot. This shoe does not. And I talked to Michael about it, and he said that that was to give that very classic, very supportive feel, which you do feel in this shoe, and I would say is a hallmark of Atreyu running shoes altogether. But in this new Cush foam, this 40% P-back, 60% TPE blend, which is soft and resilient, that gives you a very lively ride no matter where you're landing, forefoot, midfoot, or heel in this shoe. It is a very dynamic, fun, lively ride in a trainer, which is very surprising. This geometry and this midsole and this foam really allow me to really be in control of how I want to run in this shoe. If I'm up on my toes, doing faster pace, getting into 10K, 5K pace, this is a shoe that's definitely letting me really push off my toe, really dig or kick off the toe and feel the resilience of the foam pushing me forward. If this is a shoe I'm going to go easy in and sit back and land a little bit more midfoot, I'm loading up all of this platform and getting this medial support here under the arch of the foot. That's really just allowing me to cruise in a very supportive, very comfortable way. And if I'm just going out and doing a mix of paces from easy into faster running, this is a shoe that will gladly lay back when it needs to and pick up instantly. It's actually a really nice combination of a whole bunch of things. A lot of that is this very simple classic geometry, but this new foam, I cannot stress how premium and how nice this foam feels. It gives you all the resilience that you would expect from any modern super shoe from really any brand, but now again in a package where you're feeling it very, very directly. Like the base model that came before this, and really what Atreyu is always trying to do with their shoes is let you feel your mechanics. Like I said, this is a shoe that has a lot of ground feel, a lot of proprioceptive feedback. Not that you're feeling every pebble underfoot, but you're feeling where your foot is interfacing the ground. You're feeling the energy transfer off the toe. This is a shoe that really connects you to how you run, which is a hugely important thing, especially nowadays with all the technology in shoes where you're often isolated from the ground. This is a shoe that connects you to the ground, but not in a harsh way. This is a very modern, very lively, very resilient foam that gives you all of that modern performance, but in a package that still lets you understand your mechanics and really work on your mechanics. Something that I've always valued about Atreyu shoes, and one of the reasons I've always come back to the brand. And now in a daily trainer that's going to last for hundreds of miles, giving me that lively performance that allows me to really go out and do any type of run that I want, but always feel and work on my mechanics. That is kind of an ideal package and really what I want in a trainer. This is a trainer that feels very relevant right now in 2025 as we see a lot of brands moving their top tier super shoes into softer and much more compressive foams. I'm thinking something like the recent Adidas Adizero Adios Pro 4 or the Saucony Endorphin Elite 2, shoes that have very soft foams that require your foot to provide a lot of the stabilization in the shoe, but also provide a lot of the work in the shoe to really engage the foam, engage the technology in the midsole. And if you don't have strong feet, you're not going to be able to do that. They're not shoes that you can just put on your feet and just kind of keep rolling through like we had with some of the firmer shoes that we've seen from those brands in the past. So as a trainer that allows you to work your foot to really learn how to engage your foot with the ground and get the most out of this shoe, this is a trainer that feels like it's going to plug into the new generation of very soft super shoes extremely well. It may be the best trainer that you can buy for your foot to get used to running in those types of shoes. Moving forward, this is a shoe I intend to spend a ton of time in over the coming months. I've always come back to Atreyu, particularly the base model, as a shoe to really understand and work on mechanics and build lower leg strength. But the base model was just never durable where I could use it over the long term as a daily trainer. This shoe, with this wonderful midsole foam, this excellent CPU outsole, and this great fitting upper textile, is now a shoe that I can use for every run as my primary daily trainer to really work on mechanics, work on feel, build foot strength and lower leg strength on really every single training run. And that's something I find hugely, hugely valuable. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.